So this episode is going to be a little bit shorter, but in this episode, I kind of want to cover how simplicity is so essential for success in investing or understanding the economy. And, you know, ever since the whole financial system and the whole economy became so complex, it's been layered and layered to the point where it's pretty much impossible for anybody to understand the system completely. And I'm not even talking about the behavioral part of finance or economics, because that's certainly a very big aspect that really nobody can predict. Because if you could predict other people's behaviors, well, then you're obviously going to become rich very easily. But people behave differently under different circumstances, and your circumstances always change. And that's why history is a good reference to look at patterns that people have followed over and over again. But even with history, since many factors always change and nothing stays the same, you see, even with a good understanding of history, you still are unable to predict the future. Now, you could probably have a better understanding and, make a connection to, the present or the future to something that happened historically. You'll have similarities. And you have similarities all the time. Similar events that produce similar results. But the issue is sometimes it really is different. As much as people say this time it's different, and as much as they're wrong, sometimes they're right. And the times that they're right are usually the times where, you have a whole shift of wealth from the people who are correct to the people who are, or from the people who are wrong to the people who are right. And, the key to understanding how things will play out under certain events, what matters is having a simple but deep understanding of what you're trying to understand. And, it's not an easy thing, because when you are learning something, in the beginning, everything is super, super simple. But then once you actually start to know a little bit about the subject, everything's incredibly complicated, because knowing a little bit about a certain subject opens up doors that you never were able to see to new subjects. And then, these doors keep on opening, and you'll never be able to, walk into each of these doors. And the problem is you'll never gain a deep enough understanding of every subject. And so how I like to see, economics especially, is it's kind of like you understand some parts of the economic system. It's, I like to see it as a puzzle, as a whole puzzle. Now, when you're learning, you're essentially, putting some, you're essentially finding some pieces of the puzzle, and your ability to kind of connect, what happens and what is causing what, it's like attaching the puzzle pieces together. But the problem with the economic puzzle is that you're always going to be missing some pieces, because what you don't know will always be greater than what you do know. And that's something that Ray Dalio said, and it's a very humbling quote. And that's the problem with many, many things regarding economics, especially. But if you think about it, that applies to every field. Whether it's the sciences, or it's medicine, or it's whatever is out there. You just have no idea what's going to happen, and you can make predictions, and most of the times your predictions will be somewhat flawed. Now, it could be more wrong or less wrong, but it's probably not going to be a perfect prediction, unless if your prediction is so broad that it basically includes everything. For example, let's say you're asking yourself whether you think the markets are going to crash. Well, an answer could be yes, another answer could be no, but in a given period of time, I'm talking about. But you could just say that it could, and maybe it won't, and that's not a particularly good answer, but you're not really wrong if you answer it like that. But the point that I want to make with simplicity is that right now, and there has been many very complicated businesses, very complicated types of just economic and financial jargon, I'd like to think of it as, that is out there to kind of confuse everybody, and it would make sense a lot as for why people would want to do that. And most of the time, it's probably to lie to people. And let me make some examples for why having a simple understanding, but also deep understanding of, let's say, investments, for example, is so important. And the reason is, if you were taking a look at Enron back when it was booming and everybody wanted to pour their money into Enron, they were running some massive accounting scandals, lying to their shareholders, lying to investors, and no one could really tell that they were lying. Well, some people could, I guess, but not many people could, because they hid their business model so well. And everything was so, it was like muddy waters, right? It wasn't transparent, and you couldn't really understand what the business was doing. You couldn't really understand how it was making the money it was making. You couldn't understand how the business was functioning on a fundamental level. And so, maybe some investors made some money, but at the end of the day, a lot more people lost money than actually made money, because they didn't understand the business, because the business was too difficult to understand, and people couldn't form a simple understanding of the business that actually made sense. And you see a lot of that, especially in more centrally planned systems. And the Federal Reserve is a great one. A quote by Alan Greenspan it went something like, I guess I should warn you, if I turn out to be clear, you've probably misunderstood what I've said. And so, Alan Greenspan, if you don't know who that is, was a chairman of the Federal Reserve, and he's basically telling you that you're not supposed to understand what I'm saying. And so basically he's telling you that he is trying to hide something. That's obvious. And for good reason, because a lot of the time, what policymakers, what central bankers, what government officials, and I know they're different, but in some sense they're very similar. It's hard for them to be radically transparent, to be radically truthful, because that goes heavily against their agenda or their plans. And sometimes I suppose it could be better for the people if you had like an alien invasion coming. I guess you wouldn't want, people to all freak out. But you most of the times I think that people could make their best decisions for themselves. Let me reword that. Actually, everybody has their own goals, their own plans, and when you're judging somebody, you might think their plans are terrible. For example, if somebody wants to be an alcoholic, do drugs, and I don't know, play video games all day, you probably think their plan is terrible, and you probably think that somebody should take care of them, should control them, because they don't have responsibility and they have a lot of freedom. And something that I've always preached was that responsibility. So let me say it like this. So freedom is like a car, but responsibility is like your keys. And you can't have freedom if you don't have responsibility. If you do, then you're going to probably crash. And you need both to function, let's say, optimally. Now, here's the thing. Most people have enough responsibility to burden their freedom, but some people don't. And those are most of the, you could say, losers in society are the people who do not have enough responsibility. And of course, there's other factors. Maybe you're unlucky. Maybe you are something happened to you. But many of the times it's because people don't have enough responsibility, or it's because people don't have goals. And that's a very important thing to have in life as well, or else you really have no direction to go and you're just stagnating. You're just stuck in your own position. And that makes your life pretty pointless. But I want to go back to the simplicity part, not talk about random philosophical issues right now. And back to the simplicity part. Right now, since there's so much information and there's so many new ways for the economy to work, because the economy as a whole operates under so many different little pieces. You could say, think of it as a machine. It has so many little pieces, and each of these little pieces are difficult to figure out. And even if you think that you figured them out, you could be totally wrong. And there's no way that you have enough time to figure all of them out, and effort or dedication for that matter either. So you're never going to see the whole picture, and that's kind of inherently a part of the society we live in. And even if you do see the whole picture, it's still difficult to predict what people will do and how people will react, because you need to get into the psychological aspect of everyday people and of investors, of governments, that's just not easy. And history is a great way to predict things, but it's no guarantee at all. And oh yeah, I almost forgot. I kind of want to get to these valuation metrics and stuff like EBITDA, and that's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, and just basically your earnings before a lot of your expenses and what, stuff like this. I don't see really a good reason why you would use this. Now, if you believe that maybe some expenses will change, if there's maybe a tax law that will change, or something on your balance sheet will change, then I guess you could use it. But other than that, I don't see the point of all of these guys on Wall Street or whatever using all of these random ways to evaluate the company's earnings. Just because you're not taking EBITDA home with you, you're taking your net income home with you. And I think a big reason why people are using all of these metrics is for the company to look like it's producing better earnings than it actually is. And it doesn't make sense why people would fall for it, but I think that's a part of the whole just the whole benefit of keeping everybody kind of confused, but at the same time that people kind of know what's going on, where you don't have full transparency, but you have some to give confidence. The point is, Abraham Lincoln said, what was it? How many legs does a dog have if you call its tail a leg? And his answer is 4, because calling a tail a leg doesn't make it a leg. And that's kind of the same thing with its earnings. I mean, you could call EBITDA or whatever other type of earnings, earnings adjusted for whatever. You have these people who adjust it for whatever nonsense. And I think it's a big part of making your numbers look good. The CEO probably, maybe if your numbers look good, your stock goes up, your CEO gets paid better. But at the end of the day, you're not taking home whatever adjusted type of earnings, or you're not taking home the EBITDA. What you're taking home is net income. And so you want to focus on net income, and you want to invest in a very simple way. You just want to understand the company, and whatever, if you get a tax benefit, a tax change that benefits you, then great. It's going to benefit you, but you making a random calculation doesn't help you with much at all. So I'm going to end the episode here. I think that this episode was kind of unusual because I went into a ton of random stuff in this episode. But I think that the point I'm trying to make in this episode is that you want to try to gain a simple understanding, but also an in-depth understanding of complicated ideas, theories, systems, companies, whatever you're trying to understand. You want a simple, but at the same time, an in-depth understanding of it.